The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory, 1876, as Penelope Vance watched her world crumble with each drop of blood that seeped into the parched earth. The man she had trusted, loved, and followed west from Boston now lay dead at her feet, not a victim, but a criminal caught in the act of robbing the very stagecoach she had been riding. "He ain't worth your tears, madam," the dusty-clothed lawman said, holstering his weapon, while Penelope stared in disbelief at Edward Holloway's lifeless body. "That man's been wanted in 3 territories. You're lucky we caught up to him before he disappeared with your money and left you stranded." Penelope's gloved hands trembled as she gathered her scattered belongings from the dirt. The diamonds she'd brought from her family's estate meant to start their new life together were stuffed in Edward's saddlebags, ready for him to abandon her at the next station. He had planned it all, courted her in Boston society, convinced her to elope west with her inheritance, all for this moment. "Where will you go now, miss?" the stagecoach driver asked, his weathered face lined with genuine concern. "Sweetwater," she whispered, the name of the town where Edward had promised they would build a new life together. "I have nothing left in Boston." 3 weeks later, Penelope stood in Sweetwater's muddy main street, staring at the weathered sign of the Broken Spur Saloon. The respectable teaching position she had secured upon arrival barely paid enough for her modest room above the milliner's shop. Her fine Boston dresses were impractical in the frontier town, and the few items she could sell had only sustained her this long. "Miss Vance," called Mrs. Abernathy, the milliner and her landlady, "there's a gentleman here inquiring about music lessons for his daughter." Penelope turned, smoothing her simple blue dress, hoping for a chance to earn additional income using her conservatory training. The man standing before her removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. Tall and broad-shouldered, he stood with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to wide open spaces. "Madam," he nodded politely. "Yates Sullivan. I understand you teach music." "I do, Mr. Sullivan," Penelope replied, extending her hand formally. "Piano, primarily, though I can instruct in voice as well. My daughter's turning 12 next month. Her mother—" He paused, a flicker of old pain crossing his features. "Her mother was musical. Thought it might be nice for Elizabeth to learn." "I would be delighted to teach her," Penelope said, grateful for the opportunity. "When would you like to begin?" "Soon as possible. We're at the Diamond S, about 5 miles west of town. I can bring her in Saturdays, if that suits." As they settled the details, Penelope studied him cautiously. Yates Sullivan was clearly a man of some means. His clothes, though practical, were of good quality. Unlike many men in Sweetwater, his words weren't slurred by whiskey, and he looked her in the eye when speaking, rather than letting his gaze wander inappropriately. "Mr. Sullivan," Mrs. Abernathy interjected, "isn't your foreman still looking for help at the ranch house? With fall roundup coming, Miss Vance might appreciate the additional work." Penelope felt her cheeks flush. "Mrs. Abernathy, I couldn't possibly—" "Actually," Yates interrupted, "she's right. Our housekeeper left last month to marry a shopkeeper in Cheyenne. Place could use a woman's touch, especially with Elizabeth growing up. Pays better than teaching, I imagine." "I couldn't leave my students," Penelope said firmly. "Weekend teaching would still work. We're not savages out at Diamond S, Miss Vance. You'd have your own quarters, good meals, and I can guarantee your safety." The last promise made Penelope bristle. "I've heard such guarantees before, Mr. Sullivan." Something in her tone made Yates study her more carefully. "Been in Sweetwater long?" "Nearly a month." "Alone?" Penelope lifted her chin. "I manage quite well on my own, thank you." A slight smile curved his lips. "Never doubted it. Just unusual to see a proper Eastern lady out here without family." "My circumstances are my own affair, Mr. Sullivan." "Fair enough," he nodded, replacing his hat. "Offer stands. Elizabeth will be here Saturday morning at 10. Good day, Miss Vance." As he walked away, Mrs. Abernathy clicked her tongue. "That man owns the largest cattle operation in the county, and he's been widowed 7 years. You could do worse than working for Yates Sullivan." "I'm done trusting men who make grand promises," Penelope said quietly, watching his broad shoulders disappear among the town's afternoon bustle. By the 3rd Saturday of Elizabeth Sullivan's piano lessons, Penelope found herself genuinely looking forward to the girl's visits. Elizabeth was bright, eager to learn, and possessed a natural talent that reminded Penelope of her own childhood passion for music. "You've practiced diligently," Penelope praised as Elizabeth finished a simple etude. "Father sits with me every evening," Elizabeth beamed. "Says even though he can't tell one note from another, he likes listening." The door to the schoolhouse opened, and Yates Sullivan entered, hat in hand. "How'd she do today, Miss Vance?" "Wonderfully," Penelope smiled before turning serious. "Though I fear our piano is woefully out of tune. I've written to Cheyenne for a tuner, but who knows when one might travel this way." "I can tune it," Yates offered unexpectedly. "Learned watching my wife's piano being serviced." "Got the tools at the ranch." Penelope raised an eyebrow. "A cattle rancher who tunes pianos. You continue to surprise me, Mr. Sullivan." "Most folks are more than they seem at first glance," he replied, his eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity. "Reconsider my offer? Diamond S could use someone like you." Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door burst open again, and Sheriff Davis appeared, face grim. "Sullivan, Sweetwater Creek's flooding from the storm. Your south pasture's underwater, and cattle are scattered. Men are waiting for orders." Yates cursed under his breath. "Pardon, Miss Vance. Elizabeth, we need to go." He turned to leave, then paused. "Sheriff, any chance you could see Miss Vance safely to her boarding house? Streets are likely turning to mud rivers." "Actually," Penelope interrupted, "I should check on my students' families near the creek." "That's no place for a lady right now," the sheriff warned. "I'm going regardless," Penelope said firmly, gathering her shawl. "The Morgans have a new baby, and Mrs. Morgan is still recovering. They may need assistance." Yates exchanged a look with the sheriff, then nodded. "Elizabeth, go with the sheriff to the general store. Wait there for me." He turned to Penelope. "I'll take you to the Morgans, then get to my ranch." An hour later, Penelope was soaked to the skin, helping Mrs. Morgan move furniture to higher ground as the creek continued to rise. Yates had left immediately for Diamond S, but not before carrying the family's heavy trunk to safety and promising to send men to help shore up the property. "You're shivering," Mrs. Morgan noted as they finished. "You should head back to town before the road becomes impassable." "I'll be fine," Penelope insisted, though her teeth chattered. The spring storm had turned unseasonably cold, and her thin dress offered little protection. A shout from outside drew their attention. Through the driving rain, they saw riders approaching Diamond S Cowboys, led by Yates himself. "Creek's still rising," he called out, dismounting. "Everyone needs to evacuate. We're moving folks to higher ground at my ranch until the water recedes." "The baby," Mrs. Morgan began worriedly. "I've brought the wagon for you and the children," Yates assured her, then turned to Penelope. "Miss Vance, you'll ride with me." "I can manage on my own," she protested, even as another violent shiver ran through her. Yates stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "You're half frozen, and these roads are dangerous. This isn't about trust or pride. It's about survival." Before she could argue further, he removed his duster and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth of the coat and the lingering scent of leather, horses, and something uniquely him made her protest die on her lips. "Just until the storm passes," she conceded. The Diamond S ranch house stood on a rise overlooking the valley, its sturdy log and stone construction a testament to its owner's prosperity and foresight. By nightfall, the great room was filled with displaced families from the flooded areas, the kitchen bustling as ranch hands and women worked together to feed everyone. Penelope, now dressed in borrowed dry clothes that hung loosely on her smaller frame, moved through the crowd, offering coffee and comfort where needed. She found herself repeatedly glancing toward the door, waiting for Yates to return from checking the livestock. When he finally entered, mud-splattered and weary, his eyes immediately found hers across the crowded room. Something in his gaze, relief, perhaps, or something deeper, made her heart quicken. "Everyone settled?" he asked, accepting the coffee she offered. "As well as can be expected. Your men have been extraordinarily kind. Diamond S takes care of its neighbors." He glanced around the room. "Looks like you've been doing the same." "It seemed the least I could do, given your hospitality." Yates smiled slightly. "So, you admit I'm not completely untrustworthy?" "I never said you were," Penelope replied carefully. "I simply prefer caution these days." "Someone hurt you," he observed, not a question, but a statement. Penelope stiffened. "That's not a topic for discussion, Mr. Sullivan." "Yates," he corrected gently. "After pulling folks from floodwaters together, I think we're past formalities." A child's cry from across the room saved her from responding. "I should help Mrs. Morgan with the baby," she murmured, turning away. Later that night, when most had settled into makeshift beds throughout the house, Penelope found herself unable to sleep. She slipped outside onto the covered porch, wrapping Yates's borrowed coat tighter around her shoulders as she watched the rain continue to fall in the lamplight. "Can't sleep?" Yates's voice came from the shadows, startling her. "I didn't see you there," she said, turning to find him seated in a rocking chair, a steaming cup in his hands. "Coffee?" he offered. "Kitchen still warm." "No. Thank you. I should try to rest." Instead of leaving, she found herself drawn to the railing beside his chair, looking out at the storm-washed landscape. "Your ranch is beautiful, even in this weather." "Been building it 15 years, he said quietly. "Started with nothing but a claim and 20 head of cattle. Your wife must have been very brave to make a life out here." "Caroline was the bravest person I ever knew," Yates said, his voice softening with memory. "Daughter of a St. Louis banker who gave up everything to follow me west. Never complained, even when we lived in a one-room cabin that leaked every time it rained." Penelope glanced at him. "You loved her very much." "Still do, in a way," he admitted. "But 7 years is a long time to be alone." The simple honesty in his words touched something in Penelope. Before she could stop herself, she whispered, "I came west with a man who promised me the world." Yates remained silent, giving her space to continue if she chose. "Edward Holloway," she said, the name bitter on her tongue. "He courted me in Boston, spoke of building a life together in Wyoming. I believed him, trusted him with everything, my heart, my reputation, my future." She laughed hollowly. "My family's diamonds." "What happened?" Yates asked softly. "He was killed robbing our stagecoach. Apparently his plan was to abandon me at the next stop with nothing." Penelope shook her head. "The sheriff said he was wanted in 3 territories. I never knew. I never suspected." "That's not on you," Yates said firmly. "Men like that make deception their life's work." "I was a fool." "You were betrayed." "There's a difference." He set his coffee down and stood, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Not all men are Edward Holloway." "I know that intellectually," Penelope admitted, "but trusting again takes time," Yates finished. "No one should rush you." In the quiet that followed, something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but understanding. When Penelope finally bid him good night, she felt lighter somehow, as if sharing her story had loosened its hold on her. The waters receded 3 days later, leaving muddy destruction in their wake. As families returned to assess the damage to their properties, Penelope prepared to return to town as well. "My offer still stands," Yates said as they stood by the wagon that would take her back to Sweetwater. "Diamond S needs someone to help run the house, especially with Elizabeth growing up. You'd be doing me a favor. You don't need to create a position out of pity, Mr. Sullivan." "Yates," he corrected again. "And this isn't pity. It's practicality. You need better income than teaching provides, and I need someone I can trust with my home and daughter." His eyes met hers steadily. "Think about it." 2 weeks later, Penelope watched from the schoolhouse window as Yates and Elizabeth arrived for their regular lesson. Her decision had been made days ago, but she'd waited for the right moment. "Miss Vance," Elizabeth greeted enthusiastically. "I've been practicing that new piece every day." "I can't wait to hear it," Penelope smiled, guiding the girl to the piano. She glanced at Yates. "Mr. Sullivan, might I have a word while Elizabeth warms up?" They stepped outside into the June sunshine, the town bustling with activity as repairs from the flood continued. "I've considered your offer," Penelope began. "And," Yates prompted when she hesitated, "I would accept with conditions." She straightened her shoulders. "I would continue teaching on Saturdays. I would have my own quarters, as you mentioned, and I would be an employee, not—" She faltered. "Not what?" he asked, his expression carefully neutral. "There would be no misunderstandings about my position," she finished firmly. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. Miss Vance, I run a respectable ranch. Whatever you're implying would never cross my mind. Of course, she said quickly, embarrassed. I simply wanted to be clear. Crystal, he assured her. When can you start? Summer at Diamond S brought long days of hard work, but Penelope found unexpected satisfaction in ordering the ranch house, managing the kitchen, and watching Elizabeth blossom under her guidance. The girl, caught between childhood and womanhood, latched on to Penelope as a maternal figure, seeking advice on everything from music to managing her first monthly courses. Yates maintained a respectful distance, treating Penelope with the courtesy due both an employee and a lady. Yet she often felt his eyes following her across rooms, noticed how he lingered over coffee after dinner to discuss books or share stories of Elizabeth's younger days. By August, Penelope had settled into a comfortable routine, her Boston mannerisms gradually softening in the practical realities of ranch life. She no longer startled at the sound of cowboys returning at dusk, had learned to make decisions without consulting Yates for every household matter, and even rode the gentle mare he'd assigned for her use on short errands around the property. One evening, as the sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Yates found her on the porch, a letter in her hands. "Bad news?" he asked, noting her troubled expression. "My sister," Penelope sighed. "She's threatening to travel west to rescue me from what she calls my disgraceful situation. Apparently, working as a housekeeper for an unmarried man is beyond the pale, even if one's former fiancé was a criminal." Yates leaned against the railing. "Would you want to go back? To Boston?" She shook her head firmly. "No, despite everything, I've found contentment here. Purpose." "Just contentment?" he asked quietly. Penelope looked up, finding his gaze intense upon her face. "What more should I expect?" "Depends what you're looking for," he replied. "Some folks settle for contentment. Others hope for happiness. A few even dare to dream of joy. And what do you hope for, Mr. Sullivan?" "I thought we'd agreed on Yates," he reminded her with a small smile. "What do I hope for? That's getting clearer every day." Before she could ask what he meant, Elizabeth burst onto the porch, excited about a letter from her friend in town, and the moment passed. September brought cattle roundup, filling the ranch with additional cowboys and activity from dawn until well past dusk. Penelope found herself rising before sunrise to prepare massive breakfasts, directing the kitchen help through lunch preparations, and serving hearty dinners to ravenous men who treated her with a mixture of respect and shy appreciation for her cooking. Yates was often absent from dawn till dusk, returning exhausted but taking time to check on her and Elizabeth before falling into bed. Penelope missed their evening conversations more than she cared to admit. On the third night of roundup, a commotion in the yard brought Penelope hurrying outside to find several cowboys helping Yates from his horse. Blood stained his shirt, his face pale beneath his tan. "What happened?" she demanded, rushing forward. "Bull caught him off guard," one of the men explained. "Gored his side. Doc's been sent for, but he's out at the Taylor place delivering a baby." "Get him inside," Penelope ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. "Elizabeth, heat water, and bring my sewing kit." Years of managing her father's household during her mother's frequent illnesses had taught Penelope basic medical skills. Once Yates was laid on his bed, she carefully cut away his shirt to reveal an ugly but not life-threatening wound across his ribs. "Lucky," she murmured, cleaning the injury with steady hands. "A few inches deeper, and we'd be having a different conversation." "Always was fortunate," he grunted, wincing as she applied antiseptic. "Sorry you have to do this." "Hush," she instructed, threading a needle. "This will hurt." When the doctor finally arrived 2 hours later, he found the wound expertly cleaned and stitched, Yates resting comfortably under Penelope's watchful eye. "Fine work, Miss Vance," the doctor praised after his examination. "Where did you learn medical stitching?" "My father hunted. Accidents happened." She shrugged. "One learns what one must." After the doctor left, Penelope remained, changing the cool cloth on Yates's forehead as fever threatened. "You should rest," he told her, his voice rough with pain. "Roundup continues tomorrow, whether I'm in the saddle or not." "Your foreman is perfectly capable," she replied. "Your job now is to heel. Always giving orders, he murmured, a small smile lifting his lips despite his discomfort. Someone must, when the master of the house is being foolish. His hand caught hers as she adjusted his blanket. Thank you, Penelope. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it caught her off guard. You're welcome, Yates. His fingers tightened briefly around hers before he drifted into sleep. The injury confined Yates to the house for nearly 2 weeks, during which Penelope found herself acting as liaison between him and his foreman, delivering instructions and bringing reports while managing the household. The ranch hands, seeing her capability and dedication, began treating her with a new level of respect that went beyond her position as housekeeper. One afternoon, as she brought Yates the account books he had requested, she found him standing by the window, testing his healing side with careful stretches. You shouldn't be up yet, she chided gently. Man can't lie abed forever, he replied, turning to face her. Besides, I heard you've been running my ranch quite efficiently in my absence. Hardly, she demurred. I merely relayed your instructions. That's not what Blackburn says. My foreman thinks you have a natural head for ranch operations. Penelope set the books on his desk. I simply applied the principles my father taught me about managing an estate. The scale is different, but the fundamentals are similar. Yates studied her thoughtfully. You continue to surprise me, Penelope Vance. A Boston lady who can stitch wounds, manage cowboys, teach music, and apparently understand ranch accounting. Women are capable of many things when necessity demands, she replied, a touch defensively. I never suggested otherwise. He moved closer, his movements still careful. In fact, I'm increasingly convinced you're capable of anything you set your mind to. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. Your fever hasn't returned. Has it? She asked, deflecting with humor. My mind is perfectly clear, he assured her, his eyes never leaving hers. Clearer than it's been in years, actually. Before she could respond, Elizabeth's voice called from downstairs, and the moment broke. Your daughter needs you, Penelope said softly, stepping back. We'll finish this conversation another time, Yates promised, something unspoken but unmistakable in his gaze. October brought the first frost and the annual Sweetwater harvest dance. As Penelope helped Elizabeth prepare her dress for the event, the girl asked unexpectedly, Will you dance with father? That would hardly be appropriate, Penelope replied, focusing on the ribbon she was attaching to Elizabeth's blue gown. I'm an employee of Diamond S. But you're also our friend, Elizabeth persisted. And father smiles more when you're around. Elizabeth, he was different after mother died, the girl continued earnestly. Sad all the time, even when he tried to hide it. But lately, he laughs again. That's because of you. Penelope felt warmth creep into her cheeks. Your father is a good man who has been very kind to me. That's all. Elizabeth's knowing look suggested she believed otherwise, but she mercifully changed the subject. The harvest dance transformed Sweetwater's town hall with autumn decorations, lanterns, and a small band of local musicians. As Diamond S.'s housekeeper, Penelope attended with the family but kept to the sidelines, helping serve refreshments and chatting with other ranch employees. She couldn't help noticing how many of the town's unmarried ladies sought Yates's attention, or how politely but firmly he extricated himself from their company after obligatory dances. Each time, his eyes would find hers across the room, a private communication that made her heartbeat quicken. Midway through the evening, as Penelope rested against the wall, watching Elizabeth dance with the blacksmith's son, Yates appeared beside her. You haven't danced once, he observed. It wouldn't be proper. One dance between friends is hardly scandalous, he countered, extending his hand as the musicians began a waltz. Unless you're afraid. The gentle challenge in his words stirred something in Penelope. I'm not afraid of dancing, Mr. Sullivan. Then prove it, he said quietly, his hand still outstretched. Taking a deep breath, she placed her fingers in his and allowed him to lead her to the floor. His hand settled at her waist, warm and steady, as they began to move with the music. People are watching, she murmured, acutely aware of curious glances. Let them, he replied simply. I'm dancing with the most capable woman in the territory. They should be impressed. Despite her nervousness, Penelope found herself relaxing into the familiar steps, memories of Boston ballrooms fading as she focused on the man before her. Yates moved with unexpected grace for someone who spent most days in a saddle. "You dance very well," she commented. "Caroline insisted I learn properly before we married," he explained. "Said she wouldn't have her husband shuffling around ballrooms like a bear." The mention of his late wife no longer brought the shadow it once had to his features. Instead, there was fond remembrance without the sharp edge of grief. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Yates agreed, his eyes never leaving Penelope's face. "And she would have liked you very much." As the music ended, he held her hand a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for the dance, Penelope." "Thank you," she replied, surprised by her reluctance to step away. Later that night, as the Sullivan wagon rolled toward Diamond S under a canopy of stars, Elizabeth dozed against Penelope's shoulder while Yates handled the reins. The comfortable silence between them felt significant somehow, as if they'd crossed an invisible boundary. "I received another letter from my sister," Penelope said finally. "She's arriving next week to assess my situation." Yates glanced at her in the moonlight. "What will you tell her?" "The truth. That I've found a place where I'm valued for my abilities rather than my family name or social graces." She hesitated. "That I'm happy here." "Are you?" he asked, his voice low to avoid waking Elizabeth. Penelope considered the question honestly. "Yes," she admitted. "Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I've found something at Diamond S I never expected." "What's that?" "Myself," she said simply. The wagon crested the hill overlooking the ranch, its buildings silvered by moonlight. Yates drew the horses to a stop, taking in the view of the home he'd built. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked softly. "Very," Penelope agreed, following his gaze across the peaceful landscape. "I've been thinking," Yates said carefully, "about the future. Elizabeth needs more than I can give her alone. The ranch needs stability, and He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've been alone long enough." Penelope's heart began to race, but she kept her voice steady. "What are you saying, Yates?" He turned to face her fully. "I'm saying that when your sister arrives, she might find more than she expects, if you're willing." "I don't understand." "You trusted the wrong man once," Yates said, his voice deepening with emotion. "Then you'll trust the right one now." In the moonlight, with his daughter sleeping between them and his home spread below, he reached across and took her hand. "I'm asking if you might consider becoming more than Diamond S's housekeeper. If you might consider becoming my wife." Penelope's breath caught. "Yates." "Not for convenience," he added quickly. "Not for propriety's sake. But because these past months have shown me what kind of woman you are. Strong, intelligent, compassionate." His fingers tightened around hers. "Because I've grown to care for you more than I believed possible again." Tears pricked at Penelope's eyes. "This isn't a decision to make lightly." "I don't expect an answer tonight," he assured her. "Just think about it. About us. About what we might build together." As the wagon began moving again toward home, Penelope remained quiet, her mind and heart racing with possibilities she had long since abandoned. Yet beneath the uncertainty and the echoes of past betrayal, something new had taken root, hope, fragile but persistent. Victoria Vance arrived the following Wednesday on the afternoon stage, her fashionable traveling suit and imperious manner drawing stares from Sweetwater's residence as Penelope met her at the station. "This is where you've been hiding yourself?" Victoria sniffed, surveying the dusty main street with obvious disdain. "Father would be appalled." "Father disowned me when I left with Edward," Penelope reminded her calmly. "His opinion ceased to matter then." "You're still a Vance," Victoria insisted as they loaded her substantial luggage into the Diamond S wagon. "You belong in Boston society, not wherever this is." "Wyoming Territory," Penelope supplied with a small smile, "and I belong where I choose to be." The ride to the ranch provided ample opportunity for Victoria's ongoing commentary on the primitive conditions and uncivilized nature of the West. Penelope let her sister's words wash over her. Secure enough in her new life to find amusement rather than offense in the observations. As they approached Diamond S, however, Victoria fell silent, taking in the substantial main house, well-maintained outbuildings, and obvious prosperity of the operation. "You said you were a housekeeper," she said accusingly. "This is one of the largest ranches I've seen since leaving Cheyenne." "Diamond S is successful," Penelope acknowledged. "Yates Mr. Sullivan has built something remarkable here." Victoria's eyebrows rose at Penelope's familiar use of her employer's name, but before she could comment, riders approached from the pasture. Yates led the group, Elizabeth at his side on her pony. "Your employer?" Victoria asked. "Yes," Penelope replied, watching as Yates dismounted with fluid grace and handed his reins to one of the hands. He approached the wagon, removing his hat. "Miss Vance," he greeted Penelope with a warmth that didn't escape Victoria's notice. "And this must be your sister." "Victoria Vance," Penelope's sister supplied, extending her hand with regal condescension. "I've come to discuss my sister's future." "Have you now?" Yates replied mildly, though Penelope detected amusement in his eyes. "Well, we have plenty to talk about then. Welcome to Diamond S." The next 3 days proved illuminating for all parties. Victoria observed with increasing puzzlement as Penelope moved through the ranch with authority that transcended her official position. The hands deferred to her instructions. Elizabeth treated her with daughter-like affection, and Yates consulted her on matters far beyond household management. On her third evening, after dinner in the ranch house dining room, Victoria cornered Penelope in the kitchen. "What exactly is your relationship with Mr. Sullivan?" she demanded without preamble. Penelope carefully dried the plate in her hands. "He's my employer." "No." Victoria shook her head emphatically. "An employer doesn't look at his housekeeper the way that man looks at you. An employer doesn't defer to his housekeeper's judgment about cattle feed purchases. And an employer's daughter certainly doesn't call the housekeeper Penny and ask her opinion on everything from ribbons to books." Penelope set the plate down, turning to face her sister fully. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Victoria retorted. "I'm asking directly what is happening here, because it looks remarkably like you found yourself in a family, not an employment situation." The observation, so close to what Penelope herself had been considering since Yates's moonlit proposal, struck her speechless momentarily. "It's complicated," she finally managed. "Enlighten me," Victoria insisted, folding her arms. Before Penelope could formulate a response, Yates appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Ladies," he nodded, "Elizabeth's asking for you, Penelope. Something about tomorrow's music practice." "Of course," Penelope replied, grateful for the interruption. "Excuse me, Victoria." As she passed Yates in the doorway, his hand briefly touched hers, a fleeting contact that nonetheless conveyed support, and something deeper. The gesture wasn't lost on Victoria, whose eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Later that night, Penelope sat at her dressing table, brushing out her hair and considering the choice before her. Victoria's arrival had forced a timeline she hadn't anticipated, bringing Yates's proposal into sharper focus. Did she trust herself enough to take this chance? A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Victoria entered without waiting for an invitation, closing the door firmly behind her. "I've been watching you here," her sister began, without preamble, "seeing how you've changed." "For the worse, I presume?" Penelope asked wryly. "Quite the opposite," Victoria admitted, surprising Penelope by sitting on the edge of the bed. "You were always the perfect daughter, obedient, proper, contained. I never understood why you ran off with Holloway." "I thought I loved him," Penelope said simply. "Perhaps. But I think you also wanted escape." Victoria's perceptiveness was unexpected. "Boston was suffocating you, and Edward offered adventure." "A costly adventure," Penelope murmured. "Yes," Victoria acknowledged. "But look what it led to." She gestured around them. "You're different here, stronger, more assured." She hesitated. "Happier?" Penelope studied her sister's face. "I thought you came to bring me home." "I did," Victoria admitted, "but I'm beginning to think you are home." She leaned forward intently. "Sullivan has asked you to marry him, hasn't he?" Penelope's silence was answer enough. "What's holding you back?" Victoria pressed. "It's obvious you care for him and his daughter." "I trusted the wrong man once," Penelope said quietly. "The consequences were devastating." Edward Holloway was a con artist who targeted wealthy, sheltered women, Victoria replied bluntly. Yates Sullivan is a rancher who's built something substantial through honest work. The comparison is insulting to him. It's not that simple. It is, Victoria interrupted. You're not afraid of Yates. You're afraid of yourself, of trusting your own judgment again. The words struck with the force of truth, leaving Penelope momentarily speechless. Our parents raised us to believe a woman's security comes from the right marriage, Victoria continued more gently. Edward proved that wrong in the worst way. But don't let that mistake rob you of what could be right. When Penelope remained silent, Victoria rose to leave. At the door, she paused. I'm returning to Boston on tomorrow's stage. You're welcome to join me, but I don't think you will. She smiled slightly. For what it's worth, Father would hate Sullivan on principle, which I consider a point strongly in his favor. After Victoria departed the next morning, the ranch seemed unusually quiet. Penelope went about her duties mechanically, her mind churning with decision. By late afternoon, she found herself walking toward the western pasture, where she knew Yates was checking fences. She found him mending a section of barbed wire, his horse ground tied nearby. He straightened as she approached, wiping his hands on a bandana. "Victoria get off safely?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. "Yes," Penelope replied. She had interesting observations about Diamond S. Did she? Yates set his tools aside, giving her his full attention. "She thinks I belong here," Penelope said carefully. "Not as your housekeeper." Yates took a step closer. "Smart woman, your sister." "Occasionally," Penelope admitted with a small smile. She also pointed out something I've been avoiding, that my reluctance isn't about you at all. No? It's about trusting myself. Penelope took a deep breath. After Edward, I promised myself I'd never be vulnerable again, never risk being wrong about a man's character. But in protecting myself, I've been unfair to you. You needed time, Yates said simply. I understood that. Yes, but Penelope squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. The truth is, I've known who you are for months. I've seen your integrity in how you treat your workers, your gentleness with Elizabeth, your respect for me. I've watched you build something meaningful here, something that could be ours, he finished softly, closing the distance between them. It could be ours, Penelope. I trusted the wrong man once, she whispered, echoing his words from the night of the dance. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle but sure. Then you'll trust the right one now? Instead of answering with words, Penelope rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then bloomed into something warm and certain, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, Yates rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? Yes. Penelope smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Yes to being Elizabeth's mother. Yes to Diamond S. Yes to you, Yates Sullivan. His answering smile was brilliant. Took you long enough, he teased, drawing her closer. Some lessons are harder learned than others, she replied, but I think this one will last a lifetime. As the Wyoming sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, casting golden light across the pastures of Diamond S, Yates kissed her again, a seal on promises that would endure through the changing seasons of the West they both now called home.